Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Well, I'm formally proposing this private member's motion on behalf of myself, Senator McDougall, Senator Clonan, Cockrell, Keoghan and Senator Mullen. And I understand it's 16 minutes. I'm slotted in to speak for 15 minutes of those 16 minutes. I don't think it'll require 15 minutes, but I've already discussed this with my colleagues. So first I want to thank the Minister for coming to the House. I know she's enormously committed to forestry, as she is with a whole load of other things, but this is a particular area. The right trees in the right place, I think, is nearly her slogan, her brand at this stage. And she's certainly a strong advocate, and I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge the presence of one of your most senior civil servants in the department, and it's always great to see you here too as well. So I'm going to cut to the chase, folks. I think this is a very simple, reasonable motion. I think it addresses many of the issues and the challenges around forestry that we have. You will be, of course, conscious we had a lot of debate in relation to the Gresham House, and I don't intend going into the Gresham House debate here tonight. Minister, I think we've had a long exchange for 4 or 5 hours with you recently and the committee, and I know I acknowledge Senator Daly here too in relation to that. But what it did do is it spurred up something about our great pride in our forestry. It stirred up something in the people of Ireland about the commitment to Irish land, and that sensitivity around that, and that sensitivity of ownership, and the issue around that wonderful resource that is our Irish forestry, that is unique to our climate and the climate challenges that we face. So in 2020, you know, and I know, and all of us in this House know, Ireland committed to planting 22 million trees a year from 2020 to 2040. So that is 85,000 trees every working day. Wow. What a figure, what a task, and what a challenge, and what an ambition. And I'd like to think we can all go some way to helping realise that national ambition. Our national forestry targets have not been achieved. Let's not spend any more time on that and pull together our resources and our commitment and unify to bring about how we can address the shortcomings in relation to achieving those targets. The level of afforestation in 2020 was 2,435 hectares. In 2021, it was 2,016 hectares. In 2022, it was 2,243 hectares. So sustainable forestry management plays a key role in promoting biodiversity, carbon sequestration and farmer income for many. The Irish forestry sector provides a significant number of jobs and is worth over €2 billion. Further investment is needed to ensure the stability of rural communities and the rural economy and the forestry and farm sector. This is the background to the forestry motion that I and my colleagues are proposing here in the Shannon this evening. National forestry funds exist in over 50 countries. The structure is divided between individual national forest funds, and it varies from country to country and continues to increase year on year. Coillte has identified a lack of capital as being one of the challenges around forestry investment and expansion. If Ireland is to grow its forestry sector, the focus must be on sustainable forests in terms of mixed forestry, and I mean by that deciduous, broadleaf and spruce. I know that Coillte is involved and pioneering the idea of, from forestry clearances or new forests, they're talking about a 50-50. And new schemes, and I think we have to look at imaginative forestries in terms of the sustainable forest, in the broader sense of what sustainability means. The National Forestry Fund would target sustainable forestry that could yield results, and this is an important point, for a variety of investors. A National Forestry Fund would create increased transparency and accountability by involving relevant stakeholders from outside the government in their administration. We are all aware, as I said earlier on, about the concerns that have been expressed in both these houses about Coilte's involvement in the Irish Strategic Forestry Fund and Gresham House. And I don't want to get into too much detail about that. But through our proposed forestry fund that we're proposing here tonight, citizens will be in a position to make a choice to participate in a positive social and environmental investment. The latest controversy, as I said, about the Gresham House did spark a national interest about our ownership of forestry, our ownership of our natural resources and the enormous potential. And I think that was one of the good things about that debate. We can't revisit aspects of that. You know that, Minister. That's been set out clearly. But it did motivate an engagement and a conversation about how we manage this important and unique natural resource, our forestry. Clearly, the public debate has indicated that people are interested in this intersection of forestry, climate change mitigation and national pride. A forestry fund would allow them to be part of the solution. Citizens could be part of the solution. They can dip in at whatever level they wish. There'll be a group of imaginative options that they could engage with. Turning to the programme for government, the programme made commitments to develop innovative forestry strategies, and I quote on page 33, "In order to deliver this expanded and deepened climate ambition, far-reaching policy changes will be developed across every sector, including in particular developing new strategies to expand deforestation, particularly close to nature, forestry and agroforestry." Now turning to page 67 and 68 in the programme for government, and I quote, "Trees and forests store carbon, clean the air, mitigate water movements, prevent soil erosion, provide habitats for flora and fauna, and provide an active amenity for the general public." The programme and government goes on then to say that the forestry industry is a significant employer in rural communities, providing in the region of 12,000 jobs. The government, it says, will fully support this sector and will, and I quote, "publish successive forestry programmes to deliver an ambitious afforestation plan, reviewing grant and premium rates across all categories of this area, with a particular focus on an increased farmer rate support." So the motion I'm presenting on behalf of our group here today calls on the government to do a number of things. It seeks to evaluate the benefits of establishing schemes such as a state-run National Forestry Fund that could help to develop a forestry sector by creating tax incentives for those who invest in the fund, achieving climate goals through sustainable biodiversity afforestation, of which you, Minister, have been a driver of since you came into the ministry, but long before that, and is a key element of your party's policy, but now government policy. And I want to acknowledge the shift and the emphasis that you have brought to government and your party have brought in this tripartite coalition government. The movement has moved substantially. It is now commonplace to talk about sustainable environment. It is now commonplace in these houses to talk about the economic and sustainable development of our forestry, and they're not mutually exclusive, and they can be achieved. And I think that has been a shift in conversation, in language, in policy, and it's one that I welcome and we in our group welcome. So we would create tax incentives for those who invest in this fund, achieving climate goals through sustainable and diverse afforestation, furthering Irish-owned, and this is important, furthering Irish-owned and managed forestry enterprise. And I want to acknowledge the enormous expertise in our forestry sector. Indeed, I was down in Avondale the other day. I know we don't have a forestry school there now, but talking to a group of people involved in the forestry sector there 2 weeks ago, there's a huge excitement and ambition for our forestry sector. There's a keenness on it. There's a lot of young people that want to get involved in forestry at all levels, from silviculture to growing nursery stock, planting. And it's not all academic forestry, because I think there's a place for that, but there's also people who want to get involved in forestry through apprenticeship models. They want to get out on the ground. They want to be involved. You know yourself in terms of how you and the government are pursuing a policy of getting many farmers collectively. The collective result will be much more land in forestry if we can get farmers to buy in at various levels. And it is that collective combined hectares in forestry that are going to make a real significance, and it's one that I would encourage. So we are encouraging further Irish-owned and managed forestry enterprise, instituting short, medium and long-term investment models for investors, and I think that's important, with some protection. And we haven't gone into great detail, Minister, in terms of the granular detail of this fund. We don't think that's the right thing to do. We're flagging an interest. It's a very general motion, committed to a stakeholder engagement, the citizens being involved, be they urban or rural, because there are many people who live in urban space who would like to invest in some sort of reasonable return. certainly some guarantee of the initial outlay or the bond or the premium that they're investing into it, because it's important in terms of environment, it's important because it's ethical for many, it's a choice for others. And I know myself and many of us here will have our own pension funds, and now we're being asked, when we're reviewing our pension schemes, would we like to shift some of that investment into sustainable or environmental or ethical investments? And yes, there might be a slight change in the premium, but people are making that choice based on information, but importantly based on choice. So we would like to see a fund that was created that would provide high, medium and low risk investments and options. Clearly, it would have to be explained to those who wish to invest. Investing in funds in a range of sustainably approved forestry projects. And we didn't go up to say that it was private versus state. Don't want to get into that. We need more trees. We need the challenges. We see the benefits of it. And there may be schemes that can be approved that have nothing to do with state forestry schemes, but they're approved. They meet a certain criteria that you and your department is fully aware of and supports. Establishing a scheme that could be a source of support to small farmers, environmentalists, allied forestry enterprises. And I like the word environmentalist. Someone suggested to me today, do you need to be talking about environmentalists? Yes, we live in an environment. It's a built one, it's a natural one. We're all environmentalists. We should all be environmentalists. We don't have to be pure about this title, I am an environmentalist. I'd like to think we're all environmentalists. And therefore I think it's important that that word is used. And allied forestry enterprises. How can we embrace forestry enterprises in all of this? We seek that you would publish a report on a potential model, and we make that clear. We don't have all the answers. We have a concept, we have an idea, we feel people are supportive of it, of the potential model of a possible National Forestry Fund, and sometime in September. But again, we're open to you, we're open to that. We recognise their demands, but we'd like to see something worked on. And I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Senator Tim Lombard, because when we discussed this in the committee, he was one of the first people that actually flagged the idea of a model of investment and how could we reach out to stakeholders. And in fairness, you were there, and Minister McConlogue was there too, and he indicated the general, that's a nice idea, and someone suggested it was the only bit of common sense that was talked about that night. So I want to acknowledge that, because it was you that actually flew up another flag of something that we had been talking about and thought, well, how can we move that on from the basement here, in the bubble of Leinster House, in the committee rooms? How can we bring that onto the floor of this House and see if we can get something going in relation to it? I also would like to mention and thank Shannon Paulston, who is in the gallery this evening here behind me. Shannon is on an IPA parliamentary placement semester here from Berkeley University in California in USA. And when we initially flagged this to her, she went about pretty quickly about gathering information on it. Her degree is in environmental economics and policies, and she assisted greatly in the research of this debate, along with our own Robert Dunn, our Shannon's Independent Group researcher and communications officer. So there's been a lot of work in relation to this motion before us here today, and I want to thank all the members in our group for that. I noticed from a press release I received today from Coillte, and a fact sheet that said, press release and Q&A for Gresham House launches Irish Forestry Fund in Coillte. This was on Friday. I'm not going to get into the detail, it's on the Coillte website, you can look at it yourself. But again, it talked about, the need for capital, private capital, any capital, to do it. And we know we're restricted, there are certain restrictions and they are ongoing, and again, you're working and your department is working on them within the European Commission. But I actually believe that our forestry is something that the Irish people hold dear to themselves. They believe in it. They want to see it succeed. We all want to develop on our targets. And it's not a question of you failing, me failing, the government failing. We all recognise the potential for forestry. We all recognise the potential for timber, for new construction of homes, and that's really, really important. And I think that's something that we should be mindful of. I would ask, Minister, that I no doubt you've considered it in detail anyway, but I hope we can get support right across this House for this motion. I think it makes sense, it's fair, it's reasonable, it's fully compatible with the programme for government, it's not at odds with any of the policies set down in the programme for government, and I really, really do believe it's a positive thing that we can all get behind and reach out, as I said, to people both urban and rural who may wish to invest some money, some equity, some capital in something that is sustainable and is for the future. Thank you.
Crockwell. Thank you, Senator Boyan.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. Minister, how do you follow that? Such is the generosity of my colleague that he pointed out the Senator Lambert's input into this. And typical of Senator Boyan, he has brought something that I think most people in this House and most people in the Oireachtas could agree with. Irish people will get behind a project if the project is the right kind of project. And I think this is... I am seconding the motion. But Irish people will get behind it. And particularly now, there's a lot of interest in environmental issues. And I think that all we got to do now is put the plan together, make sure there's a return on investment. My €150 will go into it any day of the week. But seriously, I think people will get in behind this, particularly people who have young children who want to secure the future will be happy to invest in something like this. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. On Senator Paul Daly. 6 minutes, Senator Daly.
Gar Mahagut, Cathaoirleach, and I want to welcome Minister Hackett here this evening for this debate. The Government will not be opposing the motion, and I want to compliment Senator Boyan on bringing this motion here this evening, which will indeed open up a debate on the concept, to use his own word, the concept and the model. And I personally would like to have that debate, but I suppose we're all carrying the scars from the debate we had on the Gresham House concept, and I would therefore be very wary. And I would be very wary of any forestry fund that would not be specifically geared or aimed towards public-owned land. Any fund, in my opinion, irrespective of its citizens' money, national money, exchequer money, international money, multinational money, if a fund is going to buy land, it's going to tilt the market against farmers. And it's also going to direct them towards Leitrim and that general direction, because the competitive land in more aggressive agricultural areas further south will probably be priced out of the market for them, because a fund, irrespective if it's Senator Crockwell's €150 or if it's international money, the fund will have to be managed and will have to be profitable. So we need to be very careful. And I'm not knocking the concept, but I would agree wholeheartedly with the concept for public land, land that is already in the ownership of the state. But if it's going to put people who are going to be afforesting for profit, it's going to squeeze the fund that we have and that we all here welcomed, because we do have a National Forestry Fund. It's a fund of €1.3 billion that was announced before Christmas and is part of the forestry programme. And that, to me, is the fund that we need to manage. That's the fund that is there to reward the farming community to sow trees, let it be on a commercial basis, fairly large, or right down to a hectare. Let it be agroforestry, riparian forestry. The premium have been increased by between 46 and 66% for the farmers. It's been extended for farmer-owned land from 15 years to 20 years. That, in my opinion, is how we will have a sporadic forestry, and that is how we will save the areas such as Leitrim, which is to the fore of all our minds when we discuss forestry. Leitrim is already on 18%, and I would be fearful of any large quantities of money in any fund, as I say, irrespective of who is funding them, will head in that direction again. Whereas if it's farmer-driven, and the 1.3 billion of a fund we have is taken up by the farmers, we will have smaller scale forestry more sporadically around the country, and that is the ideal scenario, and we can meet all our targets through that model. Let it be down to a hectare per farm would help us to reach our targets. In that regard, however, I do feel what we need, and I would like to see coming out of this debate, and it's something I've mentioned before, is we're going to need an information campaign, a promotion campaign, to rebuild the confidence in the farming community, because without being negative, we are all aware of the fact, and I think we all agree on the fact, that because of the issues over the last few years, which are being well managed at the moment and are moving in a positive direction, there is a lack of confidence in the forestry sector among our farming community. So I would strongly ask that out of this debate could come a promotion campaign, an advertising campaign, maybe even a town hall style round of meetings by Quilcha or the department or whoever, to talk to farmers and show them the advantages and the potential financial gain there is for them in getting into forestry, let it even be on a small scale. Like 1 hectare of Irish native trees can return over €1,000 a year. Over 20 years, it's 20,000 and you still have the crop to harvest. I think a lot of people would buy in on that. It doesn't have to be fund, large-scale driven. But I would also like to see a debate on, once and for all, definitively telling the Irish farmer that they will have the carbon credits for the forestry they sow, coupled with, hopefully sooner rather than later, a proper farm-by-farm inventory of carbon sequestration, including the hedgerows of Ireland, which there are 300,000 kilometres of. And I guarantee you, if there was an inventory done on any individual small-scale suckler farmer in the west, the northwest, if you couple the hedgerows, the grassland, tell them what carbon they're sequestration already, they would then add in a hectare of forestry or more. And if they got the credit, and believe you me, the day is coming where the funds that we're discussing will be buying carbon credits, not land for forestry. So we need to be starting that debate now and making sure that it's not funds that are wheeling and dealing in the carbon credits of the forestry, irrespective of who sows it, and it needs to be sown and it will be sown. And I think if we could couple that debate with this debate and get a definitive answer for the farmers that they would actually gain some credit from their carbon credits, pardon the pun, going forward, they would then seriously look at planting their hectare plus of forestry. And I do think that is the way to go. The farmer driven, the farmers own the land. If we start any system where someone else is going to be buying the land, there will be consequences down the line.
Garmargot and Senator Tim Lambert, 6 Shana Maid.
Thank you, Chair. Minister. First of all, I would just want to acknowledge the members of the Agricultural Committee that are here. I think it's a really well-working committee, and I think we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but I just think the committee works very well, and there's an awful lot of members of that committee in the House tonight. I think this debate is a really good debate, and I think it comes out of the debate that we had about the previous fund that's been proposed by Quilcha, and the knock-on implications about what our debate we had in society about our forestry programme. And I think it's been a really good debate because we had to flush out where we're going to go with this forestry programme. Like, the scale of what we're proposing between now and 2050 is absolutely amazing. We're talking about bringing our forestry levels up to 18% of the actual area of Ireland. And what that means is, and I've no issue with County Louth, it's basically planting County Louth geographical area twice between now and 2050, or planting half of Cork County. That is a significant area of land. And that's not in private ownership. That's not in public ownership. The majority of that is going to be in private ownership. And how we're going to get the private entity to get involved in that is really important. And I think the statement that the Minister made at the committee, and Paul has, Senator Daly has restated it, the figures stack up. The figures are quite significant. Like, if you were to have the opportunity to set 1 hectare and over a 20-year period draw down €20,000, it's a really significant volume of money. And that's the story that needs to be told to the forestry programme. To have €1.3 billion put into it is a significant sum of money. And now it's about telling that story to make sure we can actually get the farming community and the landowners involved. But I think this debate is about something else. This debate is about trying to make sure that everyone can be involved. Every single person. And I mentioned that at the committee, that everyone, if you're working in Eli Lilly or working in God knows where, if you want to have the opportunity with a social conscience to invest in a climate fund that you could see forestry grow in Ireland, you should have that ability. Let's widen out this pot. Let's leave everyone be a part of this. And we've heard Quilcha's view that need funds. We've heard they need access to funds. I think the Irish society need access to the opportunity to actually invest in forestry. but we need to create that vehicle. And that's what this debate has mushroomed into. How can we now create a vehicle where Irish society can invest in a fund so everyone can be part of this changing process? And I mentioned in my previous remarks that it was like an SSIA style policy. Something of the idea that you invest in a government bond and you knew exactly where it's going. So if the government were leading this, if the government were involved in it, if there was a credit there pertaining to it, I think there would be an unbelievable buy-in there. And I made those comments at the Agricultural Committee, and the reaction I got was quite amazing. People want the opportunity to be part of the story of change. They want the government to actually give them the vehicle to be part of it. And I believe the passion is in there in the department to do it. That's why they published a forestry programme that has moved the payments from 15 years to 20 years. That's why they've made it really important that we get the information out there to the general farming, landowning community that they have the opportunity to invest. But now we need to push that circle out. And I think some speakers mentioned that the next generation is the issue. And if you're married, if you have kids, if you've whatever, you want a society that's going to be there for them. You want an environment that's going to be there for them. So how can you invest to make sure that happens? And that's all we're looking for here. And I think the motion that's been put together has been really well drafted. I compliment the Senator for putting it forward. I also compliment his help for putting it together. And that's a really significant proposal, that we have young people helping an older senator put together a really good piece, wise and old, to make sure we can do something right. So, Minister, I appeal to you today to take this motion on board. We're not opposing it, you know that. Come back to us. We have an idea that could work. It could be phenomenal if it's worked upon. And if it's worked upon, everybody can be part of this focus for change. Thank you, Chair.
Willie Breaker, Senator, and Senator Lynn Boylan.
I think this is a very timely motion, and I would like to commend Senator Boylan for bringing such positive proposals forward. We need to ensure that communities and environmental ambition is at the heart of any proposal that emerges in relation to this. And while the motion itself doesn't make any direct reference to the topical Coillte joint venture, I do think it is important to take the opportunity to raise it once again, because I think for us in Sinn Féin, the best approach to afforestation is supporting farmers, public bodies and Coillte. And it was highlighted during the recent Gresham House debacle that the type of vehicle was required to allow Coillte access to forestry grants premiums again, but the Minister has since acknowledged that the new state aid rules that came into effect on January 1st may actually allow Coillte access to these supports directly. I think in terms of the recent joint venture, in the first instance, the Minister must issue a new shareholder letter of expectation, instructing Coillte not to proceed with any similar ventures, and should then look at all options, including a fund for disengaging the Gresham House venture. The Coillte deal will see millions of euro of public funds used to subsidise the purchase of huge swathes of Irish land by a British investment company, and the investment provided by Gresham House is unnecessary, as if a workable forestry regulatory framework in place, farmers could simply plant for themselves. So we all have heard how the deal was done behind closed doors, and has rightly been criticised, I think, by a broad cross-section of stakeholders, and it is a rare occasion when you have environmental NGOs and the farming lobbies coming together on a single point, and I hope it continues into the future, but it does bear marking that when you have all the stakeholders opposed to such a deal. I do think, though, and we all agree that Ireland needs significant levels of forestry if we are to meet our climate obligations, and they cannot be done, like everything with climate action, without the engagement and the buy-in from local communities and farmers. I mean, that is what a just transition is all about, bringing communities with you. And I do think that this government has overseen the disengagement of those stakeholders from forestry, and the Coillte proposal hasn't helped to mend that that bad feelings. I do think I want to point out as well that there are problems with Coillte, but it is a larger systemic problem with semi-state agencies. Other commercial semi-states are in a similar bind, and it was through parliamentary questions put in by my colleague Owen O'Brien revealed that the Climate Act and the obligation on public bodies to pay heed to the climate action does not apply to the semi-states. And that is very, very worrying. For those of us who spent a long time in the pre-legislative scrutiny of the Climate Act, we pointed out that the semi-states should be held under the obligations of the Climate Act. But what that means is the main polluting entities that are within the government's control, so Dublin Airport Authority, the single biggest polluter, and Bord Namona, aren't obliged. So, look, just to get on to I suppose what the motion itself is about, which is a National Forest Fund, I think it's an idea that certainly merits discussion. As the wording of the motion highlights, there is no consensus on the type of model. Some research by the UN FAO revealed that there are some National Forest Funds supported through general taxation, while others are about investment opportunities. And I hear Senator Daly's concerns about the potential that can cause, or the risks with that proposal. But I do think that there are a lot of people, if we were to fund it through bonds, that are struggling with the cost of living crisis, but there are also a lot of people who have built up savings over the pandemic, or who have money and are looking around for sustainable investment. And rather than them investing in fossil fuel companies like BP and Shell that are recording record profits, I think that there is a pent-up demand out there for people to invest in sustainable opportunities. And the divestment campaign by 350.org was successful in getting a lot of institutions like large sovereign wealth funds, universities and pension funds to divest from fossil fuels. So look, I think there's a lot of lessons for us in how we address forestry in this country, but I do think that this motion really merits serious consideration as a possible route for us to meet our climate targets through afforestation, and to help people, I suppose, do their bit and to invest in sustainable industries rather than those dirty fossil fuels.
On Shannon Mark Wall.
Minister, I want to welcome you into the House tonight. I also want to thank Senator Boyne and indeed all those involved in preparing this, and the independent group of senators as well, using their private members' time to discuss this very important matter. As has been mentioned in the introduction of the actual bill, over 80% of this great country was once covered in forest, a figure which is now over 11.6%. And as also been mentioned, we now have a target to get to 18%, a fairly significant target to get to 18% by 2050. How we get near that target is an important conversation for us all to have, and that's why tonight's discussion is so important. In our opinion, this must involve the state-led fund targeted at furthering Irish-owned and managed forestry enterprise. Unfortunately, I'm not on the Agricultural Committee like most of my colleagues here tonight, so I do, Minister, want to mention the Gresham House deal. I think it is important, as part of this discussion, to discuss the recently proposed partnership between Coillte and a UK-based investment fund, which is, in the opinion of the Labour Party, is a bad deal, bad concept and a bad idea for so many reasons. The forestry sector in Ireland has been crying out for assistance for years. Recent figures, and as outlined in this motion, show the government is only reaching 1/4 of its own afforestation targets, with 2010, the last year that over 8,000 hectares were planted. Indeed, in this partnership, and the proposal has been opposed, as has already been said, by a number of organisations, including the Irish Farmers Association, which call it a scandal, by the Irish Wildlife Trust, and the Irish forestry owners have described it as not being in the best interests of rural Ireland. The question remains then, Minister, why are the government satisfied with a deal that so many of those working in the sector and directly affected are simply not happy with? We in the Labour Party understand that a new approach must be taken to forestry. As a country, we are nowhere near meeting our targets and are unlikely to meet them by bringing in foreign investors to buy up Irish land. It's simply not a solution that we can support. And as was said in the debate in the Dáil, which you attended recently, Minister, Deputies Kelly and Sherlock said at the Dáil recently, as I said, government should support this industry directly through the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, or through the investment of new capital, or indeed through such a fund as being proposed by Senator Boyne tonight. tonight, because rather than outsourcing all the profits to the private sector, such funds will be used by far greater effect by increasing our level of afforestation through Irish-based investment, and as has been said by a number of colleagues tonight, supporting Irish farmers to plant their lands. Minister, I wanted to bring up the ash dieback disaster, which has still not been fully addressed, and there's an opportunity tonight to bring that up, and it's particularly for those farmers who are affected by the disease of their crop, and they need to be properly financially assisted and encouraged back into planting. The IFA Association Farm Forestry Chair, Jason Fleming, has recently been quoted as welcoming a commitment from yourself, Minister, to review the ash dieback scheme this year. He's further quoted as saying affected farmers have been waiting long enough and need to know when the review will be completed. Ash dieback, he is quoted as saying, has a devastating impact on ash plantations and therefore has had a significant effect on the commercial value of the timber crop. The current scheme is wholly inadequate and does not compensate farmers for the financial loss incurred by the disease. Taoiseach, of course, have said that they estimate up to 90% of ash trees will succumb to the disease, with serious implications not only for timber production, but also for amenity, biodiversity, carbon segregation, landscape and culture. Of course, without the proper financial encouragement from the state through a National Forestry Fund, as has been discussed here tonight, who will blame these landowners for not getting involved ever again. And of course, Senator Daly, I would support the information campaign. I think this very important point you make tonight, that an information campaign on the whole forestry industry needs to happen, and I totally support what you have said tonight. And of course, the other issue that I wanted to raise with you tonight, Minister, is the timely work and forestry licence scheme, which will be the foundation that is urgently needed for afforestation in this country. From talking to those in the industry, this continues to be the biggest drawback from those currently in the industry, despite recent improvements, and a major drawback for those on this island thinking about using their lands and investing in afforestation. In conclusion, Cathaoirleach, we welcome this timely discussion. The need for investment and assistance in our Irish-based industry is urgent. The environmental crisis calls for urgent state intervention. It is our opinion that the domestic industry is more than capable of once again increasing afforestation in this country, given such investment and assistance, and given clear, timely licences to achieve it. We thank the independent group for their private members' bill here tonight, and we look forward to you, Minister, coming back with a positive reply. Cathaoirleach.
Margaret, Senator Wall. Anish, Glenn, Mr. Tara, Mr. Hackett.
Thank you. Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And look, I'd like to, I suppose, first thank Senator Boyan and his colleagues for bringing forward this motion and giving us the opportunity to discuss forestry in the Shannon Chamber. And it gives me the opportunity also to, I suppose, comment on some of the points raised and also to indicate the developments that are currently taking place in the sector. Again, I think it's important to say that I do welcome genuinely the interest which is evident in the contributions here this evening, and again wants to emphasise the importance of the forestry sector, not only to the Irish economy, but certainly, as Senator Boyne highlighted, to the Irish people, and the important role forestry plays in the delivery of our targets under the Climate Action Plan. During the discussions today, and indeed in recent debates in the Dáil and at meetings of the Joint Oireachtas Committee, TDs and Senators have been united in their support for increased afforestation for the benefit of farmers, for the benefit of rural communities, for the benefit of climate and other aspects such as water quality and biodiversity. And that's why we in government are, this is what we in government are seeking to achieve with the new forestry programme. We have hugely ambitious climate targets, and forestry is at the very centre of those ambitions. This is why the government has committed to a €1.3 billion forestry fund and forestry programme with substantially higher payments for farmers. This is the biggest and largest funded forestry programme ever introduced by any government here, which will see an increase in the forestry premiums of between 46% and 66%. Let me be very clear. It has been designed to ensure that farmers, as the primary investors, will be its primary beneficiaries. Farmers will receive 20 years of tax-free premium payments compared to 15 years of premium payments for non-farmers. In addition to receiving this 33% more premium payment, farmers who plant new forests will also receive the single farm payment on lands converted to forestry. Other private landowners will not receive that payment. The new forestry programme is also designed to have an emphasis on close-to-nature forestry and will include a small-scale native woodland scheme, which we discussed actually at length in this chamber last year, whereby farmers will be paid to plant mixed native broadleaf forests of up to 1 hectare in size on farms and along watercourses without the need for a forestry licence. Another clear incentive to our farmers to consider planting their land. Comprehensive public consultation has taken place over the past year on the development of a national forestry strategy, which resulted in the publication of a shared national vision for the role of trees and forests in Ireland to 2050, together with a new draft strategy which sets out a clear set of objectives for the role of trees and forests in Ireland between now and 2030. The new forestry programme 2023 to 2027 will be the primary means by which the strategy will be implemented over the next 5 years. The forestry programme 23 to 27 is subject to state aid approval from the EU Commission. The previous state aid guidelines in the forestry sector expired on the 31st of December 2022 and have been replaced with a revised version as of January 2023. And the introduction of these revised guidelines meant that a formal application for state aid approval could not be made before January 2023. My department is continuing to engage with the European Commission to get this state aid approval process completed as soon as possible. The launch of a new forestry programme will offer great opportunity to improve perceptions around forestry across a very broad range of stakeholders, and there is now a real opportunity to ensure that the forestry sector can deliver on the legitimate expectations of all its stakeholders. As such, it incentivises a broad range of planting options, such as native forest creation on public lands, amenity forests, neighbourhood schemes, woodland improvement schemes, and woodland environment fund. But it is important also that those with an interest in the sector recognise these growing expectations of what forestry can and should be delivering for society, from carbon sequestration to protection of watercourses and biodiversity, to creating employment and displacing concrete and steel in construction. With the What Right approach, I'm confident that forestry has the potential to achieve all those goals. While the precise timing of the state aid approval will be a matter for the European Commission, in the meantime, farmers can still engage with their planners to have much of the preparatory work done so that they can officially submit their application once it opens. And I would urge farmers to do just that. In relation to forest licensing, I'm pleased to report that the system is now working well, with turnaround times on licences substantially improved. When I first took over, or when I first became minister, actually, what the debate was all about felling licences. Where are the licences? Where's the felling licences? Where's the sort out the backlog? I'm glad in one sense now the debate is now about afforestation. It's future looking. It's about getting the trees in the ground, and I welcome that. And that is a significant shift, I think, in the debate and an improvement in what we've done in government in the 2.5 years. So to emphasise how efficient the licensing system has become, in 2022 the Department of Agriculture issued 4,713 licences, which was over 1,200 more licences than the applications received last year. So if we go back to August 2021, we had 6,700 licences on hand. Now we have just over 2,500, and that continues to reduce each week. Licences in 2022 for timber felling and forest roads were both at record levels for any single year. There are now over 1,000 approved afforestation contracts with approximately 7,300 hectares ready for planting as of now. This is and we have seen real progress here, and I think we want to continue that push and to become ever more efficient. Part of that is the confidence in the sector and confidence with farmers. So I absolutely am supportive of a promotional campaign, advertising, whatever it takes, so farmers understand the benefits it can serve on their farms and also in their pockets. While the new forestry strategy and programme are not yet finalised, the Department has introduced an interim afforestation and road scheme in order that those with valid approvals under the old forestry programme can plant and build roads in line with the new programme. Under these interim arrangements, which have been put in place pending approval of the new programme, those with valid existing licences can now proceed to plant at the new programme rates, at those higher rates. And we have already received 137 applications to proceed with planting under the interim arrangements. That's in the first month of this year. And that corresponds to some 884 hectares. More is expected for the rest of this spring planting season. We've also received 26 applications to proceed with road construction under the interim arrangements. We are committed to keep this critically important sector moving through this relatively short period between the old and new programmes. Felling and non-grant aided road licences will continue to issue, and the Department's significantly enhanced licensing system will continue to progress existing afforestation applications up to the point of approval, pending the state aid approval. Under the new programme, farmers, as the biggest landowners in the country, will have the opportunity to play the most significant role in the creation of new forests. And we hope that they will take advantage of the generous incentives on offer to help drive increasing afforestation. The afforestation targets set out both in the Forestry Programme and the Climate Action Plan are ambitious and will require the input of all stakeholders. The Government had asked Coillte to get back into afforestation in order to help the country meet its ambitious forestry targets. That is why Coillte have been exploring all available options to support the creation of new forests in Ireland. Under their new forestry strategic vision, Coillte have stated their aim to grow 100,000 hectares of new forests by 2050. And this vision will be key in supporting the delivery of 1/3 of Ireland's afforestation target and providing a carbon sink of 18 million tonnes of CO2. Coillte itself, as senators are aware, has been precluded from directly receiving premiums following this decision of a Court of Justice of the European Union, and under the existing forestry programme could not draw down premiums itself. As I said, my department is currently working intensively to securing full state aid approval for the new forestry programme, and without prejudice to this ongoing deliberative process, clarity will be sought on specific scenarios and details of possible claimants under this programme. This includes the possibility for Coillte to be a direct beneficiary of forest premiums under the programme. I'm acutely aware of the concerns that have been expressed regarding Coilte's involvement with the Irish Strategic Investment Fund and Gresham House. Indeed, it has been debated at length over the past number of weeks. Coillte has partnered with ISIF to establish the Irish Strategic Forestry Fund as one of the number of models it intends to deploy in order to enable afforestation at meaningful scale. However, as myself and my colleague Minister McConalogue have repeated, our preferred option is for farmers to plant forestry on their own land, and that is why we have designed the new forestry programme to achieve. Just to be clear, Coillte will not sell any existing publicly owned forests to the fund, nor will Coillte seek to purchase any public land on behalf of the fund. I want to put that on the record here in the Seanad. Any land purchased by the fund will already be in private ownership, and no private landowner will be forced to sell land to the fund. The total area of new forest to be planted under this particular arrangement is 3,500 hectares, a tiny percentage of our ambition overall. Building afforestation momentum in a sector that has been stagnant is necessary, but there are various options to reach our ambitions. That is why Minister McConalogue and I have asked Coillte to examine how they can work more closely with the state, as well as with farmers and local communities. Coillte have outlined to us that the fund is just one of a number of models they intend to deploy in contributing to the state's overall forestry targets. Our main focus now in the department is on securing EU state aid approval in order to introduce the new programme as quickly as possible. We know that we have a job of work to do to change the perception around forestry, but increasing our afforestation rates will be good for the environment, for our climate targets, and critically for farm family incomes. With regard to public investment in forestry, there is merit in teasing out this more in the coming months. I'm all ears for any ideas, indeed there's one here today, for ideas that will increase the number of trees in the ground, whether that is public funding, private funding, citizen-led, state agency investment, local authority investment. It is all positive for forestry and climate action. We are currently working on many of these, be it through existing initiatives or through the new forestry programme. I'm looking forward to continuing the work together with farmers and all stakeholders to deliver on the new forestry strategy and the new forestry programme for the benefit of all. And I think actually just a statement that Senator, where's my start of my speech, Senator Lombard, I wrote it down, I thought it struck me. People want the opportunity to be part of the story of change, and I thought that was very eloquently put and is something I'm going to use again if you don't mind. But so I want at the end to thank certainly Senator Boyan and his colleagues for bringing forward this motion and for enabling the debate, and thanks to the senators for their inputs.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that reply. Senator Cloonan, you're next. 6 minutes if you're partaking.
Oh, good to see you. I certainly won't speak for 6 minutes, but just to say, I know, Minister, that you and I have had a very brief conversation about trees in general, but the principle of forestation is very close to my heart. And I know that Ireland is one of the most biospherically depleted countries in the European Union. And I mean, it always strikes me when you travel through the country how empty it is of woodlands and trees, and particularly native species and our deciduous mix that we should have. So look, I wholeheartedly support what Senator Boyan has proposed, and I take great encouragement from your response in all of the various initiatives that are there. So, you know, really I wish everybody the best of luck with it, but I look forward to a time when we have our landscape back to something like it ought to look like, and, you know, an environment that, you know, that we should be living in, because it's as I said, so depleted at the moment. We can only improve from where we are at the moment.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Murphy, you are next. 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Acting Chair. And again, I probably won't take the 6 minutes. I won't welcome you to this chamber because you're part of it, Minister. But look, I know my colleague, Senator Daly, has led out on this today. And I know that he has said we will not be opposing this motion. And I want to compliment Senator Boyan on bringing forward what is really a crucial issue and a crucial debate. And discussions like this are very, very important. And forestry is going to be important as we go forward. And environmentally, if we want to, you know, keep some of our farming methods going, we have to, you know, in some way, you know, account for our carbon count. So we can't have the best of every world, but we can have the best of a lot of worlds if we go with this policy. Now, most people would agree that probably the deal which Quest did mightn't have been the best in the world, but it's up to us all to work together with the farming community, because I believe the farming community will actually get really involved in this. If we have good meetings, good explanatory policies, we now have a situation for our native broadleaf trees, you know, 1,100 per hectare, paid up to 20 years. You know, there's 2 and 3 hectares could be put in by lots of farmers. And talking to quite a number of them, they think this is significant. And we can do huge things with woodlands as well. Can be very enjoyable for people as well. We shouldn't forget that aspect of it. And I am willing to, you know, accept the word of Minister McConlogue and to Minister Hackett. And of course, as already has been said, we have announced a huge package, 1.3 billion. For forestry development. And both of them have been saying that farmers will be central to the success of our overall forestry strategy. The government has been clear in its policy direction through the design of the forestry programme and the climate action plan that farmers will have the biggest opportunity to deliver on our forestry targets and to benefit from our forestry payments. But we have to deliver on that. And sometimes when you talk to farmers on the ground individually, they can talk a lot more to me than they might do at a public meeting. And they do want to invest in this. They do want to be part of it. They understand that there has to be environmental changes. But it's to bring them along the road with us. And I think it was Senator Daly, I was watching part of this debate when I was doing something else in my office, talk about our carbon count. And all the carbon count that's there in our hedges and trees that are there at the moment. And it's very important that that is taken into our calculations overall. So just not to, you know, continue this debate any longer from my perspective, I think it's good we have the debate, Senator Boyan. I think we have to work out a programme that has to be crucially in terms of how we go forward with the farmers, with the farming community. And I have no doubt that they will engage and engage positively. And remember, in relation to environmental schemes, going back many years, farmers really got into those environmental schemes. The first environmental schemes we had, they were very enthused by them. They made great improvements to their lands, on their hedges and everything else at the time. So farmers, if they're treated fairly, and we talk to them plainly and fairly and offer them the proper incentives, I have absolutely no doubt they will engage. So I'm positive for the future, and whatever difficulties we have, I think we can definitely work them out. Come on.
Thank you very much, Senator Murphy. As there are no other senators presenting, Senator Boyne, can I ask you to respond to the debate? You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And firstly, I want to thank all the contributors, Senator Daly, Senator Lombard, Senator Boylan, Senator Wall, Senator Clonan and Senator Murphy for their very constructive contributions. I think they were really touched on points, and some of them that I didn't even touch on. I think it's been a very positive debate. There hasn't been that many senators in the chamber, but that doesn't take from the very high quality of this debate and engagement. And I want to thank the senators who took the time to be here and engage. I also note the importance of Senator Daly and Senator Lombard, and indeed Senator Boylan, including myself. We're on the agricultural panel, so we've discussed this at great length. And I want to take this opportunity again to thank you, Minister, and Minister McConnell and your officials for the huge engagement. It's a really, really constructive committee that's represented by all political groups in the House, and I think it's done great work. And I think it is genuinely has had its concerns. Yes, we've had robust debate, but I think everyone's on board about realising our targets. And, you know, I think it's very important, and it was echoed in all the contributions here tonight, that central to all of this is the farmers' engagement, and that the solution is around farmers, farm landowners, and the potential for that. And that has to be central, and is the message we need to get out here. Because I'm very, very conscious every time I stand up here that it's important that we hone in on our messaging, that we communicate on our messaging. We don't want to say it here, but we then leave here and continue to communicate, because that is the art and the essence of politics, that we communicate our messages. And that brings me to the next point, is that a lot of people suggested that the Minister, you would look at this idea, and I know you spoke favourably of it, in terms of a public engagement and constant. I think that's important. I think people need to know that. But again, going back to one of our proposals in terms of this investment scheme and options, it is for everyone. And Senator Lombard is right, you know, and you quoted him there. It is about people can feel they can get involved at various levels. It's not rural versus urban. There are benefits to forestry in terms of sequestration and all of that. So it is about our future. It is about being ambitious. It is about making farmers and others central to this plan and this vision. It is about keeping the focus that we said and the government have committed to, planting 22 million trees a year between 2020, well now 2023, and 2020 to 2040. And as I said earlier, that is 85,000 trees every single working day. That is an enormous challenge. And I think it's important that we keep our ambition high and the challenges, and we keep the focus on that. I want to join with senators who talked about the importance of the carbon credits, and particularly with farmers and hedgerows. I think it's a really, really important point that you make, Senator Daly, and one that I support, and again want to call for it here tonight, because another message I want to get out of here today, that we have to seriously support farmers in terms of an audit and some sort of credits for their hedgerows on their farms. I think it's a really, really important thing, and it's a load of biodiversity and environmental benefits from those hedgerows, so it'll take off on a number of issues. So as they've said, it's important, it's opportunities, it's about investment, it's about support, and I think it's about people wanting to be together to make and realise our targets. And we talked a lot about, you know, the issues and the debate we've had in the last few weeks in terms of the Gresham House investment. That was clear. It stirred up something in the Irish people, that they wanted to be involved. They wanted to be part of this natural resource. And I leave you here tonight with another call, and it's a bit beyond the parameters of what we're here tonight to talk about, that we don't have a National Forestry Authority. Coillte is not our National Forestry Authority. It plays a very significant role, and I'm fully supportive of it. But we do not, it's a natural resource. Timber, forestry is a natural resource, and yet we don't have a National Forestry Authority. And I think it's something to look at, because we have to have a level playing field for the public sector and the private sector. And there are people who will say that Coillte, rightly or wrongly, it's perceived that they have better advantages, maybe they prepare better cases, I simply don't know, in terms of their licensing and all of that. But we've got to have a level playing pitch for the private sector and the public. And I think that's really important. And I'll leave you with that call, that we would look seriously, Minister, at a national authority for forestry. And I, again, thank all the people who spoke in favour and indicated their support for this motion.
Thank you very much,